Hi, I'm Kimberly Bennett, licensed professional counselor of over 20 years and a homeschooling mom for, starting our 6th year this fall. I'm also the founder and CEO of the Homeschool Counseling Network, a website devoted to providing free advocacy, resources, and multiple directories, uniting homeschooling families with professionals who are equipped to help them along the way in their homeschooling journey. I'm going to share with you performing due diligence, what that is, and why it is important for you to learn how to do that when you are searching for a provider or a professional to help support you and your family on your home education journey. What is due diligence? Due diligence, definition-wise, according to Merriam-Webster, is the first definition is it's the law. It's the care a reasonable person can exercise to avoid harm, if you will, to persons or property. Number two, in reference to business, it's the research and analysis of a company or an organization done in preparation for a business transaction, such as a corporate merger or securities. But I also consider it a term that is very applicable when talking about searching for that good fit with a mental health provider. So before you enter any therapeutic relationship with a mental health professional, it's important to perform your due diligence. Now, what does that actually mean, due diligence? Well, it actually means doing your homework. It involves researching your potential provider and verifying that they have credentials that they say they have, such as licensing and certifications, and asking relevant questions before you ever set foot inside their actual or virtual office. So how do you go about doing that? Well, first of all, it depends on how you find your provider. Here at the Homeschool Counseling Network, we do invite providers from all sorts of disciplines, if you will. That includes counselors, psychologists, marriage and family therapists. We do invite them to join the network. We also invite coaches to join. Coaching is a little bit different. If you want to know a little bit more information about the difference between coaching and counseling and how they are credentialed or licensed, if you will, or how they are monitored. Coaching is vastly different, and it is monitored very different, hands-off, as opposed to the mental health disciplines. And for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be talking about clinicians who are licensed in the United States. It is my long-term goal to actually expand the Homeschool Counseling Network to include providers in areas such as Canada and across the globe. But that's going to take a little bit of me performing my due diligence, where I can learn more about what it takes to be licensed in the certain disciplines in Canada or in Europe or in New Zealand or Australia, where I have had many clinicians reach out to me and want to join our network, and I would love to have them there. I would love to expand to that, but I'm going to have to do a little homework to see what it entails, what the licensure laws look like, because even here in the United States, stateside, as you've learned from previous videos where I've talked about those credentials and what it takes to get licensed and to be able to work as a mental health professional, it varies from state to state. So I can't imagine what it must be like from country to country. Is it different from province to province in Canada? I don't know, but stay tuned and I'll get back to you on that. In the meantime, for now, for the Homeschool Counseling Network, I do allow professionals to apply, and I ask them when they apply for membership into the Homeschool Counseling Network that they submit to me their licensure information. That includes the state that they're licensed in and their license number. I include all of that information on my website so that you, the consumer or the potential client, can go and take that information that they've given me, and then you go check that against the state's database. I would love, love, love to be able to say that I can sit there and go through every single person to verify that they have a license that they say they have, and that their license is in good standing, and that they don't have any complaints against them, or that it is not lapsed. But in all honesty, I am the Homeschool Counseling Network right now. We are an LLC that hopes to transition to a nonprofit sometime in the future. So I run the show as a one-woman show, also with the help of my wonderful VA, Nikisha Blaine of Savvy VA. Shout out to Nikisha. But between just the two of us, I don't have time, in all honesty, to go through and check every single person's licensure status. So instead, I feel like I wouldn't be doing a service to the community unless I taught you, the client, how to do these steps for yourself. So what does that involve? When you go to our website and you go through our searchable directory, I'll put a little video up here that shows you how to navigate through our website and through the different directories that I have listed there, because I have them listed based on counseling and mental health professionals particularly. Those are the ones where we really look for licensure, or even treatment centers. You will go through and you will see the clinician's name, and then you will see their licensure status with a license number. That is part of the requirement that I have for potential members to join. They have to give me their licensure information. So what do you in turn do with that information? Well, I'm also going to put a video up here that shows you a link. I'll just give you, for example, I'm licensed in the state of Texas. If someone wanted to, if I were still practicing and seeing clients and someone wanted to come see me, and let's say that I was a member of the Homeschool Counseling Network and someone found me because I happened to be close to them and they wanted to come see me in person, or maybe they wanted to see me online, because if I were practicing right now, I am licensed in good standing in the state of Texas, and I could see anyone virtually throughout the entire state of Texas. They wouldn't have to just see me in person. What they could do is take my licensure information and go to this website where they could type it in and they could verify that I do have a license. My license is up to date. It is current. That I do not have any complaints against me, or any, I've not committed any crimes, as far as that, anything that would put my license in poor standing. And what it means to be able to renew your license is every 2 years, according to the state of Texas, I have to take so many hours of continuing education units. Just because I finished my master's degree over 20 years ago and I've been practicing in that time, it doesn't mean that I'm done with school, which I don't mind. I kind of like learning anyway. So always learning, always growing. Here, but all you have to do is go into Google and type, let's say you lived in Iowa. You can type in, and you found a counselor listed that you wanted to make sure that they had their license, it was in good standing, and that there weren't any red flags, if you will. And we'll talk more in another video coming up, so stay tuned. So you would type in a licensed professional counselors or licensure verification into Google in Iowa. And then it would send you to that state's credentialing website. And there's usually a pretty easy way to navigate. I'll show you what it looks like here in Texas in a brief video. And that way you can type in that person's name, you can type in the licensure number that we've given you, and then you can verify that person is who they say they are. That is definitely the first step before you ever set foot into a professional's office. Now you know that they are licensed and credentialed. In all states, we have to also sign that we have completed these continuing education requirements and that we don't have any complaints against us, that we don't have anything that would compromise our ability to serve as a professional counselor. That means that we're not compromised in any way. What are some examples of being compromised? Okay, being under the influence of substances is one, or that we have committed a crime in some way, or that we have had any type of inappropriate relationship with a client. If you want to learn, so that is the first thing that you should do. You want to check and verify that they have the license that they say they have, and if you are actually seeing a clinician who is not fully licensed, who is currently under the supervision of another clinician, you're going to want to verify both their associate level of licensure, as we call it. What that means is that this person has finished their master's degree or their doctoral degree, depending on what level of practitioner you are seeing, but they still have to work for a number of years supervised underneath another fully licensed clinician, because that's how we learn how to be therapists. We learn it by doing it. So you're going to want to check two sets of licensure information there. You're going to want to check the associate level license of the clinician that you're actually going to see, and you're going to want to check their supervisor's license status. Okay, so that's before you set foot in their office. get your provider on the phone or through an email chat or whatever their preferred form of contact is for scheduling that session. Make sure that they actually have experience in dealing with the issue, or what we call the presenting problem, that you want to seek help with. I'll give you an example. When I worked in private practice, I would have insurance companies a lot of times contact me and ask me to see former members of the military or service personnel. And I would have to politely decline and say, I actually don't have any experience or training working with members of the military. I'll be honest with you, if I had taken on those clients just to have another client so that I could build my practice quicker, I would have been doing a disservice to myself because I did not have any experience in working with them, and I would have been doing a disservice to the client. In order to, you want to have a clinician who has experience working with whatever presenting problem you are there for. You wouldn't go see a pediatrician when you are an 87-year-old adult. You would want that. It's probably the best example I can give you. Ask them what experience they have dealing with a presenting problem and what their kind of training and background is, and just get as much information as you can before you step foot in their office.
Number 3, ask about the different treatment approaches that your therapist is going to use. Some examples are solution-focused brief counseling or person-centered counseling, which was founded by Carl Rogers. And that's the approach that I used the most, was person-centered counseling. I was trained in his unconditional positive regard, which is, in all honesty, is the closest thing that a therapist can come to with a client as far as getting unconditional love. That means there's nothing that you can tell us as therapists that we are going to judge you for. That would make me a Rogerian, if you will. I was trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is another approach, which means I pretty much take a look at your thoughts, your behavior, and your feelings and your actions, and how all of those things relate to what is going on in your life and how we can focus on changing one of those areas. Sometimes if we change the way we think, it can help change how we feel, and then in turn change how we act. Sometimes we can start with changing how we act, which in turn will influence how we think and how we feel. So that was one of the major approaches that I was trained in. But definitely ask your therapist, what is their approach? Most of them will actually advertise what their approach is, tell you a little bit more about what that approach means on their website. And I also tried to include that information in our directories. But ask them what type of therapy they do so that you'll kind of know a little bit more about what to expect before you ever set foot in their door or sit across from a camera for a virtual session. You're going to also want to make sure that you verify what is the session cost going to cost you, what are potential co-pays, any other fees, any fees that's involved. And plus also your provider should be, we'll talk about that just a little bit later on in the video. This is not just your responsibility as the consumer, it is also the responsibility of the provider to give you this information. We call that informed consent. I'll come back to that in just a minute. Okay, so tip number 5 for performing your due diligence. You're going to want to ask about things like office hours, fees, and length of sessions. A lot of people don't realize that the clinical hour is not technically 60 minutes. It's technically 50 minutes. And in some cases, it might be a 45-minute session. All of this information should be included in your initial paperwork that you should be made aware of before you ever start services to begin with. But you're going to want to ask so that you cannot feel like you're being cheated for those sessions. What happens if you are a no-show? What happens if you are late? What happens if the clinician is a no-show or if the clinician is late? That happens. I actually had a flat tire once and had to do my very best to get in touch with that client. At the time, Walmart was across from my practice. I thought, I'll just go pick up these things really quickly. Come out, had a flat tire. I probably could have walked to my office, but didn't want to leave my car there across a busy highway to get to my practice. So I had to let my client know. I was pretty good when I ran a practice. I always gave you 1 or 2 guineas unless there were emergencies involved, but time is money, and your time as the client is just as important as the clinician's time. So make sure that you verify with them and that you have a clear understanding of what their practice hours are, what happens for no shows or for late fees, and also if you need to get in touch with them for whatever reason, how are you going to communicate with your therapist? Is there a certain form of communication that they prefer? I had a separate, at the time, telehealth wasn't a big thing. I haven't practiced since 2013. It came on board really big after that. But at the time, I had a separate phone that I used simply for my business or my practice. And I had a message that said, hey, I'm not in an emergency room. If this is an emergency and this is what constitutes an emergency, this is what you need to do instead. What are the clinicians' plans if they have an emergency? I'll give you an example. As I was closing my practice, I was also pregnant with my son. And well, babies come when they want to. So my son was born 6 weeks early. Before I ever even got pregnant and opened the doors to my practice, I had to have a contingency plan of what would happen and how my clients and my cases would be covered in the event of an emergency. Well, going into labor 6 weeks early, guess what? That constituted an emergency. So I had to have a clinician that was on call that could help me notify all of my clients and reschedule all of them and be there for them as a contact if they needed a therapist to see during the time that I was trying to not give birth, but you know what? Babies come when they want to. So you need to know all of these different plans, and all of this information should be provided to you again before you ever step foot into that clinician's office. Okay, so now that we've talked about what due diligence is on the part of the client, let's talk about the fact that due diligence doesn't just stop with the client or the potential customer, as I like to say, because technically, yes, it is a client-therapist relationship, but you are a consumer. You are a customer. So it also resides with the responsibility for due diligence resides with the clinician as well. Therapists and treating professionals have ethical responsibilities as well. This process is known as informed consent. When you go in and you fill out all that initial paperwork and you meet your client, all the additional, where your eyes are almost crossed by the end of it and you've signed your life away, and you fill out all of that background information, they should also tell you what to expect and what not to expect. What are the realistic expectations of being in therapy? Therapy is not a cure-all. It does not always work the way we want it to. Why? We're humans and we're all different. And we all have different expectations and different personalities, and we all have different histories and different backgrounds and different approaches. And your therapist is just as much a human as you, the client, are human. So it's important to keep your expectations realistic when you go into therapy. And it is also important for you to remember that your therapist is also human. That it is absolutely paramount that your therapist communicate this to you. There should not be any 100% guarantees or your money back, if things don't turn out just exactly the way you want them to. That doesn't work in therapy. This is not that kind of an infomercial. This is not that kind of a space. Nothing works quite that way. But this is a process that is known as informed consent, where it is our responsibility, it is our duty to let you know the pros and cons of what can happen in therapy. Sometimes in therapy, things can get a little bit worse before they get better, because part of being in therapy is part of growth, and part of growth involves growing pains. But if you have that supportive, connected bond with your therapist, then you're not going to be going through those growing pains alone. They're going to be going through them with you. So what is informed consent? Here's a definition from Good Therapy. Informed consent is the process of informing a client, patient, or research subject of the risks, benefits, expected outcome of a research project, medication, medical procedure, or therapeutic approach in which they have agreed to take part in. Well, basically, therapy carries risk and reward. For growth, there are growing pains, but you need to know what to expect, at least within reason, before you ever step foot in that office. And it is your clinician's responsibility to let you know. So I hope this was a good introduction to help you feel a little bit more confident, a little bit more comfortable in performing due diligence. You don't have to be afraid of researching, and I hope I haven't scared you to death of, oh my goodness, can I ever trust any provider? Absolutely. You just have to remember that providers are human, And I myself, even though it wasn't necessarily a bad doctor that I would call it, we did not have a meeting of the minds when it came to my child. And I am the mom, I am the parent, and I have the final say. And I know my child better than anyone. Well, guess what? You know yourself better than anyone else. You know your child better than anyone else. And if something is just not going well in your instincts and it's not sitting well with your personal gut and it's not sitting well with your mama gut, as I like to call it, or your parent gut, then perhaps it's time to look for a different provider.